Pebble in My Shoe podcast. My name is Miffy Hold and I'm the host here. The pebble in my shoe is an analogy for an inner niggle or knowing that becomes so insistent that we have to pay attention. We can ignore it only for so long and eventually have to stop to investigate it, listen to it, and honour what it's telling us. It becomes a catalyst for action to change something that no longer serves us. This can be something internal, like a belief or mindset. It can be about how we behave in certain situations or relationships, or it can be something that changes our life trajectory, like ending a relationship, changing careers, or moving to a different place, that sort of thing. Taking the action and making the change invariably requires courage, often a leap of faith, and at the very least, to try something new and outside of our comfort zone. Whatever the action or change happens to be, the pebble ultimately moves us to live more authentically, more aligned to our true nature. My intention for the conversations here is to inspire or offer hope to those of you who resonate with the stories shared, that you will hear something that supports you on your own journey, and if there's a pebble in your shoe, that you'll find the courage to make the changes that align you closer with your authentic self. Thank you for being here, and let me introduce today's guest. My guest, Michelle Funke, also known as Mich, is an energy healer and soul coach with a focus on grief and trauma. In this episode, we're talking about bereavement and loss, the trauma of tragedy and the consequential healing journey. If you've been bereaved, please mind yourself in the listening. Maybe you need to listen at another time or have someone with you while you listen. Just do what's right for you. That said, Michelle's story is also one of hope. Her own experience of deep grief and trauma have led her on a painful and meaningful life path. At the age of 21, her fiancé died tragically in a car accident. And if that wasn't enough, she and her husband lost their sweet baby boy, Conor James, in 2017. Michelle says, through the tears and the gut-wrenching pain, I searched for a deeper meaning to it all. What I had known all along, deep down inside, surfaced into my conscious awareness. My own journey through grief and trauma had given me a unique gift, a deep soul calling and passion for holding space for others in their darkest moments. She says, healing is our birthright. We all deserve to heal. It's an absolute honour to introduce you to Michelle Funke. Hi, Michelle. You're so welcome to the Pebble in My Shoe podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's lovely to chat to you.
Brilliant. Can we start, Michelle, with you introducing yourself so our listeners can get a sense of who you are?
Sure. Hi, I am Michelle. I am an energy healer and soul coach. And I mainly work with people who are struggling through trauma and grief. And that is really largely based on my own experiences, which have led me to this point. I have 2 children on earth and 1 in heaven. And I am living in Ireland and moved here from South Africa. So have had quite a few life experiences, to put it that way, that have also led me really to this point, and really zoned it in for me. Okay. So that's pretty much, I guess, who I am and why I'm here.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for that. Yeah. So, in this podcast, we talk about the pebble in the shoe as being something that instigates a change in us, or something that we have to face and look at and own maybe. But where do you want to start, Michelle, with the pebble in your shoe?
Everything in my life has led me up to this point, and it's quite interesting to see, looking at it from the perspective of the pebble in your shoe. When I was 21, my fiancé died in a car accident, and that experience I had this kind of deep burning need, or I was compelled to help other people who'd been through a traumatic experience, and so that's when I went into kind of the counseling realm, even though I was, securely in another career, and from there it kind of grew. And I conceitedly or arrogantly thought that, "Oh, I've done my experience with grief, you know, I've got that taped." And then I was shown differently when our son passed away. There was a whole other level of grief and trauma. And, in every single astrology reading I've had, in human design, in it all kind of points to trauma and grief, and crisis being very much in my realm, and so all these experiences have really shaped me and then led me to this point where I feel that I would like to help other people navigate their crises or grief or trauma. So I
Yeah.
guess in a nutshell, that would be how the pebble in my shoe has influenced my life, and brought me to this point. And it's kind of, there's no getting away from it. It is really just always there, and always this need or thing compelling me to, this is really the space where I need to be and work, and where I can make the biggest difference in the world.
Yeah, wow. So there's a huge amount in that, Michelle,
Yes, yes,
because it's kind of a whistle stop through events that were massive and still are in your
absolutely.
life. Is it okay if we go back and unpack a little bit around the time that your fiancé died in the car accident? Is that okay with you?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Can you tell me about that time and how it impacted you at the time, being 21?
Sure. Well, I think at 21, you feel pretty invincible. And, while you may know that people die through like grandparents or whatever, you don't ever realize, or it really shakes you to the core when somebody, so young, that was my first experience at any rate of, somebody my kind of age group that was really connected to me passing away. And so tragically, and I think it just, yeah, the trauma around it really just, it really shapes you. I think it can't be any other way. So yeah, he was on his way to my house basically, and he never arrived, and I went looking for him with my dad. And my dad has like been my rock through both him and my little boy Conor passing away. My dad has been, oh, my anchor. Anyway, so I'm really grateful to have had that support from him. But yeah, so we went looking for his car, and we found the wreckage on the side of the road, and then had to kind of piece together what happened, and go to the police station, where they unfortunately weren't very well trained in dealing with people. They didn't really have the compassion and the, oh, I don't know, just the filter, I suppose. They said quite a few very horrendous things to me that have really stuck with me. When I found his wreckage on the side of the road, I had this really cosmic moment that I find very hard to put into words, but it was like I was standing there, and it was like this time warp, and time stood still, and I kind of was a bit sort of blind and deaf. I was just sucked into that moment, and I had this minute of feeling like super connected, and oh, I don't even know how to explain it. Like I knew everything in that minute. It was just a very odd cosmic moment.
Can I
Yeah.
just ask you a bit about that? You
Yeah.
know, like at the time, obviously, there was all that going on. It was a shock. But what you're describing it now as a cosmic moment where you knew everything. Can you tell me what your interpretation of that moment is now in hindsight? Like what happened in that moment for you, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's very hard to put into words, but I think it was like this, like lining up of, this is your life path. I don't think I understood it as that at the time, but I think
Mhm.
in retrospect, it was that moment of being so connected and so attuned and aligned, and just being shown this flash of support from the universe, that we are all connected, that we are all divinely held and loved. It was everything all at once, so it's very hard to put into words. And I think there's some elements in there that there are no words to describe. But yeah, it was almost like I had like touched the divine or been, do you know what I'm trying to say? I don't know how to put it into words. It's very hard to explain. Um, and it was hugely comforting, and it was hugely, it wasn't just a shock moment, you know, it was so much more than that. And I feel like I tap into that a little bit now in my work. I have the similar kind of experiences when I'm working with clients and I'm tapping into that space for them, you know. So
Yeah.
maybe it was just like a little taster of that, or the beginning of an integration of that for me.
I think that's so powerful. And I'm mindful that you know that now and you're able to tap into that now. But when you were 21 and you were at the roadside and your boyfriend had just been killed in a car wreck, like you're standing there and you're having this cosmic moment, but at the same time you don't have that full awareness of exactly what this signifies, maybe, or you know, the implications of this. Can you talk to me about how then going forward from that manifests? Because you talk about how you got into counseling and stuff, which was a very different from the career you had. So can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. I was working in media at the time, my PR and kind of journalism. So it was kind of very far removed from counseling. And after we walked out of the police station, a chaplain came out of the police station and gave me this really big hug. And it was like another one of those cosmic moments, you know, like in that instant, that hug was just so beyond words. The level of kind of comfort and peace that it gave me in that instant, you know, and that really moved me. So to the point where I thought, well, I need to pay that forward. I need to pay that moment forward. Like it was just this burning need in me, even in the midst of my grief, even in the midst of my shock and all those things. I had this really sort of burning seed in my heart that like that was important. And so then I you know, researched a bit and I found a community counseling body that worked with the local police station in our area. So I joined them, I did their training, and then became one of their community counselors. So we worked very closely with the police station and with the local kind of emergency rooms, A&E.
Did you have counseling yourself
Absolutely,
as
yeah.
well? Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. I had I had a very checkered teenage years. I had been to a psychologist for various things through those teenage years, and I just had a really great relationship with her, so I went straight back to her. And interestingly enough, like since I saw her, when I saw her as a teenager, she was an educational psychologist, and she changed her kind of focus to grief, and so she was massively helpful. I was also very lucky to have a lot of really supportive friends and family that got me through that time. And honestly, I feel like I wouldn't have made it through without them. But yes, absolutely, I did do counseling, and it was hugely beneficial for me. I can't say what it would have been without it, because I feel like it really helped me direct my grief and process it and work through things that came up, no matter how odd they seemed, you know. And I feel like it really allowed me to, she gave me that space to grieve authentically. And that's like my big thing, because I think that there's a ton of like societal stuff around grief and how we expected to feel or expected to grieve, and that there's a time limit on it and all this kind of stuff that pushes people to feel like they need to grieve in a certain way. And that is completely not true. And I was very grateful that she gave me that space and opened me up to that, you know, that everyone's going to be processing whatever it is that's happened in their lives differently. And they all need to do their own things to go through it. And she encouraged me, you know, like I felt I had, you know, at 21, I just couldn't comprehend it. Like death is just so final, and or at that time, that was my thinking. You know, I think of it a bit differently now. But you know, I couldn't kind of comprehend that he was here one minute and literally gone the next. You know, and that's the thing with trauma, right? Like trauma totally interferes and interrupts the normal grieving process, if I can call it normal.
Yeah.
Um, and so she really helped me work through that, and that like I needed to go and I needed to find out more. And so like I went and I looked at the police files. I went and I interviewed the fireman that cut him out of the car. I went and, you know, just I had to go on this huge discovery mission. And she even like organized an accident kind of inspector to speak to me about like the accident, and was just like getting those little, it's all kind of trying to process it and logically kind of work through what actually happened, I think we all get to the same place where there maybe aren't any answers, but it really
There's,
helped me a lot to have that support.
yeah, and what I'm sensing in that, Michelle, is a huge amount of courage to do that, because in grief, when you're so hurt and sore and raw, sometimes to actually go into the details of what happened to the person could be something you'd rather avoid.
Like I needed to know. I was trying to put this big thing of his death into some kind of organized information that I could understand, and so I think that I was really just grasping for some kind of reason or like method to the madness, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, yeah, to understand what happened. Yeah, and then I'm curious then, Michelle, about the time frame we're looking at here, right? So you're having counseling yourself with this lovely psychologist who happens to have, sort of moved into the grief space, um, which sounds serendipitous as well. And then you're talking about how you got involved in training as a counselor. So
Yeah.
what are we talking here? Months, years?
Years,
Okay.
I joined the trauma counseling unit probably they won't let you join until a year after your trauma, right? And that is their you need to have done a certain amount of healing, right? Which I totally respect and agree with. And then I had to do a whole lot of training and all sorts of psychometric testing and all that kind of stuff to be accepted as a part of their thing, which I did. So that probably took me about 2 years. And after, yeah, my fiancé had died, and then I was a member of that for about 10 years. And ended up being one of the leaders. And then I was involved in a whole lot of programs of training police and training new counselors as well. So then the lady who had started the unit and I, in the end, were running it. Then, for various reasons, after about 10 years, that unit kind of ended. But during my course of being a trauma counselor, I then decided I wanted to take it further, and I started my degree in psychological counseling with criminology and psychology as my two majors. And then that took me forever to finish. Life happened. I was busy. I had my own business. And then I had children, and then, all these that kind of things happened. So that took me a good like 15 years or more even to finish that degree. But, I got it. So
Reflecting on that period of time and the process, if you like, for you from that moment standing on the roadside, having that cosmic moment, as you describe it, and then, continuing through, what was the pebble in your shoe
the
for that?
pebble in my shoe was paying it forward, was paying that hug forward and using that moment of cosmic knowing. I just knew that I felt compelled and this burning desire to help people in the space and make this difference and change in the space.
Okay. So that's the bit I'm interested in then, because hindsight is great. We look back and we go, oh, yeah, that all fits together. Look at that thread running through there. But while we're following the thread, we don't necessarily know. And that's kind of what this pebble is in a way,
Absolutely.
isn't it? And so I'm curious then about how that manifested for you. You talk about this knowing, you just knew you had to pay it forward. So can you talk to me about how you knew?
I felt it in my heart space, right? And it was this really big thing of I've got to do this thing. And kind of all my interests, I suppose, things start coming into your field when you have this idea or this thought or this heart opening to a way, or to a thing that you feel compelled to do. And yeah, I think a whole lot of things just aligned, and opportunities arose, and there was opportunities through the trauma counseling unit to do courses and things with kind of experts in the field, at educational institutions, or attend lectures and those kind of things, which I did, which obviously just made me feel more and more like, yes, this is the right fit. Yes, this is what I want to do. But I think it all really culminated in, I would say, my 30s only. So this is I'd say a good 10 years later, where I remember having these moments going, God, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing with my life? I'm writing here about extravagance. I was kind of doing travel journalism, which was really, I was in all these five-star places that hardly anyone can afford to go to, and whatever, which was lovely. It was a beautiful experience. But I was going, oh, but I'm not making any impact on the world. I'm like, what I'm doing is superfluous and fun, but it's not meaningful. It wasn't meaningful to me. And then again, a whole lot of things shifted and opened up. So yeah, a whole kind of series of events. And I think that's exactly what happens, right? When we're on the right path, when we're having this moment of alignment, everything just opens up and things come into your space to allow you to move forward in that direction.
So you're describing working in this nice job, sounds lovely, reporting on lovely luxurious places to holiday and stuff, but feeling that it was superfluous, feeling that it wasn't meaningful, and that there was this more meaningful thing, which sounds like another pebble rolling around in the shoe there.
It is,
And
absolutely.
then I'm curious about the courage to change direction. Like you said how things open up when something aligns with you and come into your field, but how do you then step into that?
It was incredibly hard. It was probably it was a very challenging time because so what had happened, I think, is that the trauma unit work was fulfilling that need that I had, or that drive to be of service and to help people in that traumatic grief space. Um, and then when that ended, I think that I felt a bit adrift, and I was like, oh, what am I doing? Like, I'm not giving back. I'm not fulfilling that need anymore that I need, to give and be of service. And so that's really what started the thought process. But it was so hard for me to make a change because at the time I had my own business as a journalist and doing some public relations, so in property and travel. But I also had business partnerships with my parents and their publishing company. And I think I was their continuation plan, that I was going to take over their business when they retired. And so it felt like I was very trapped and stuck in that space, and it was very hard to get out of. And I'd tried, because it was an incredibly stressful job and it was actually affecting my health and all sorts of things. It's kind of 18-hour days, very tight, very hectic deadlines. It's just manic pressure. And I just didn't want to do it anymore. But I didn't know how to get out. Then I fell pregnant with my daughter, and she, my darling blessing, was my big excuse, or my big reason to be allowed to make the change, if I can put it that way, without kind of really hurting my parents too much, because I felt like I'd be disappointing them. There was all like that kind of stuff wrapped up in it. But honestly, like I couldn't work that job and have a child, because my husband works away, so he's away for long periods of time. And so there's no ways I could be basically a solo parent and work those kind of hours. It just doesn't go. And so that was my beautiful excuse and reason. And, and that was what opened it up and allowed me. So I thought, okay, well, what am I going to do now? Now is my opportunity to make a change. So I closed down my business while I was pregnant. I did a coaching course. So it was authentic self-empowerment, some NLP stuff, and then some hypnotherapy. So I did all that while I was pregnant. And then by the time she was born, I had kind of wrapped up most stuff, most things, and moved into the coaching space when she was about a year old or so. That's how life kind of aligned and opened up, because I'd been sitting there going, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. I don't know how I'm going to change careers. I don't know how, feeling stuck and trapped. And then, something comes into your space to make it all align, and make it all kind of work out. And
yeah, that's really powerful. Yeah. And so you're still in South Africa at this stage, Michelle?
I was still in South Africa at this stage, and then a whole lot more serendipitous things, coincidental things happened. So then I was working on my coaching business. I was seeing clients, and then
And can I ask you just about the coaching business? So are you coaching for grief at that stage, or
yes.
what? Yes. Yeah.
So look, I did coach on lots of different things. I help people with all sorts of stuff, but my main focus was always the trauma and the grief stuff. And I actually worked with, like, as a part of a wellness program for some big corporates. So I was the trauma counselor on call for some big corporates, also banks and stuff. And I don't know, like South Africa has got quite a high crime rate. So there was quite a few like bank robberies or like things like that I would go in and counsel for. So that was like group and individual sessions. But then I also had like other clients aside from that. Yeah, I did like relationship work, I did like goal setting, like a whole lot of different things, But I you can't only do the trauma stuff. I think it takes quite a lot from you. It can be quite heavy. So I do like to kind of spice it up with a few other clients with other things. But yeah, that was the main thing that I was working on. And then I fell pregnant with our second child, our middle child, Conor. And oh, that was all fine, and I carried on working. But then sort of towards the end of the pregnancy, it got a bit like I went into preterm labor, so I had to just stop working at that point. And then yeah, he was born, and he all of my children have been early, right? All three of them. And so Rachel ended up, my firstborn daughter, ended up in the ICU, the NICU, for a couple of weeks because she was prem. And Conor, they managed to keep him in me until due date. So he came out and he was like, got great APGAR scores, was like perfectly healthy. He was the only child that came back with me to the maternity ward, which was such a blessing. And I'm so grateful to have had that experience. He wasn't well, but they released us home. They thought he just had a bit of jaundice, but he wasn't. There was something else going on, and so a couple of days later, of course, it was over a weekend and whatever. So on the Monday, we took him back in to see the ped, and the ped said he's really ill. They suspected some sepsis, so they admitted him. They started him on a whole lot of like antibiotics and stuff, and that was like 4 or 5 days after he was born. No, maybe 6. Anyway, and then on the day after he was admitted, he had a massive heart attack, and yeah, and so it basically he had a virus. It was Coxsackie virus, Coxsackie B, and that attacked his heart, and it happens to so few. It's so rare, and they can't explain why it happens, But anyway, the virus attacked his heart. So it basically put him into heart failure. He had this massive cardiac event, and then developed myocarditis. And so like his heart was about 30% functional. Him then from the NICU where he was to a specialist cardiac hospital and ward, where he received, great care, but there was very little they could do. And it was very hard seeing your baby like that, sort of attached to all these machines and stuff. And it was quite a shock. And that, after he was born so healthy and everything had been so great, like you just didn't expect that. And yeah, then he ended up being put on ECMO. They were hoping that his heart could rest a bit. But look, there was always like this tiny little ray of hope that something would happen. But in reality, it was going to be hard because, had he survived, he would have needed a heart and lung transplant, which it's just almost, he was 3 weeks old and they can only do that at 3 years old. And so they would have had to try and find something to bridge those years medically. And I don't know, it wouldn't have been a great life. I don't think it would. Oh, anyway, he was on this ECMO, and then he passed away. And the day that he passed away was also, I knew it was going to happen. I knew, it was that kind of knowing. And I will say, like, from that cosmic moment with my fiancé, like after that, I didn't realize at the time, but a lot had changed in me, and I had these just knowing of things and being able to kind of just know things, before they happened. I feel like it opened up that kind of part of me, that connection. And so, like, yeah, on the day that he passed away, I actually, he was really ill and lying there, and he got kind of hospital acquired pneumonia from being on the ventilator. And then he'd had like a superbug, and the hospital acquired pneumonia was some really hectic type that didn't respond to normal antibiotics. And it was just like, it just felt like all these hurdles, And I remember standing by him, and my husband was away, of course, for work. And like Conor
Okay.
was stable and he needed to go and work. So he thought, okay, well, he's stable, he's going to go, But I think again, it was all aligned. I think he needed to be away. I think that was how it meant needed to be. And yeah, and so I remember just standing there and just hearing that he then had a super bag and ugh, all this kind of stuff. And I just looked at him and I was like, it's too much. It's too much for your tiny little body to. So I honestly, I said to him, if you choose to fight, I will be here with you and I will fight with you and I will do whatever I can for you. But if you choose to let go, it's also okay and you can go and I'm proud of you and I love you and you fought really hard. But like, it's a lot. And so, and I left and I knew, they had such strict visiting hours anyway at that cardiac place. And so I had to go and driving home, I just knew I was just like a total wreck. And I mean, I hadn't even been home. I mean, I lived about 20 minutes away from the hospital and I hadn't even been home for a full hour before they phoned me and asked me to come back. So, and he'd passed. But I knew, and it was like, and I was glad that I said those things to him, and I was glad like that I'd given him the permission and told him that I loved him and that I was proud of him. And, but it was just too much for him, and in a way, now, like as shocking as it was then and traumatic and all those things. And as much as I miss him and all the time still and like wish he was here with us, and know that he is in a way, but wish that he was here with us, in the flesh. I just think of the life he would have had and it wouldn't have been a great one. And so like in a way, there's a bit of like relief, or I don't know how to put that, but like I just think, and if it had been that way, we would have navigated it and made the best of it. But I just think it would have been really challenging for him, and I don't think it would have been a great quality of life.
Yeah. Wow. Gosh. I'm so sorry, Michelle, that you went through all of that and your family.
Thank
Gosh.
you. That's been
Massive.
tough, but we've had some big learnings from it, and I think I want to use them to help other people, and I want to. That's like that, and it's hugely healing to be able to do that as well. I think for us, or for me
Wow.
certainly.
Yeah. And like, I mean, there's so much that we could unpack in that story. I mean, not least the strict visiting hours around, within that. I mean, like I just can't imagine sending a mother away from their baby who is so sick. Like it just
Oh,
seems
it and
inhumane almost.
absolutely. And I think one of your questions is kind of like, what do you know now that you wish you'd known then,
Mm,
or whatever. And I feel like I should have advocated, like that is one of my things that I feel like I wished I'd done better. And it's like that's wrapped up in my trauma, right? Like that's some of the stuff
sure.
that has come up for healing that I feel that, they when they put him on the ECMO, they told us that he had a 30% chance of survival. And I should have then asked for more access, and I should have advocated for that.
And maybe though too, Michelle, there's something in that they should have said to you in your postpartum shock, dealing with a very sick baby, they should have said, Michelle, you're going to need to be here with your baby now.
Yeah,
Like, I know that there's a term, medical trauma. And when you say it, it sounds a bit trite because hearing
massive,
your story, it's just that there it is, right? It's this,
massive medical
and
trauma. Yeah,
then you come away feeling responsible for not having advocated to be there, and yet the system is set up to not let you be there and stuff. So
absolutely.
that's huge, isn't it?
There's a lot. Yeah, it is a lot. But
Mm.
so the serendipity that I think I lost track of in that story, sorry, is
Mm.
his name, Conor James. So my husband and I visited Ireland in 2013. So that was just after we were married and we were talking about starting a family. And in our road trip around Ireland, it was actually on the highway between Dublin and Galway. We were having a discussion around like if we had children, what names do we like? We were kind of just dreaming and whatever. And so I got out my little notebook and we'd made notes and girls' names were always a bit uncertain, but the boy's name was going to be Conor James. That was like the name. So then when they told us that he had a 70% chance of survival, my husband said to me, if he doesn't make it, we are going to Ireland because it just felt like fitting, because, we were here and we were dreaming about him and came up with his name and all that stuff. And anyway, when we'd visited here, we just had felt like a real connection to Ireland that is also hard to put into words. So we came back after he passed away in 2017, and we scattered his ashes actually at a stone circle just down the road from where we now live. And that just felt right for us, and like we went against, like, this is going back to the authenticity and grieving, or moving through your grief and or your trauma, is you got to do what's right for you, because we didn't have a big funeral. We just had a tiny little ceremony in our garden. We didn't do any of the things that like are expected of people that grieve, if you put it like that. And we kind of, as soon as we could get his ashes, we left, for a week to do this. And it just is kind of against what, there was a lot of tut-tutting, from the people
Yeah.
around us. And it just felt right to us. And we were just really going on like what felt right, what sat right with us. And we were just really listening to our needs and our intuition and our what we needed to do,
Yeah.
and that was incredibly healing to do that. A couple of years later, a year later, exactly to the day, um, we had our third child, Jaden, and then just after that, we went into COVID, and we had to sell our house and move, and so because obviously my husband working away couldn't work during that time, so it was just like a big knock financially, anyway, and we both just kind of looked at each other and we went Ireland, and it was just right. And then we've now ended up moving to Ireland in 2020 in the height of COVID lockdown. um, and so here we are. And yeah, and we are now 20 minutes down the road from the stone circle where we scattered Conor's ashes, and it was all kind of not by design. It's just
Yeah.
how it progressed.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Gosh, what an odyssey. Like it's massive. And there's so many things I want to ask you, Michelle. But one of them is you said about the tutters.
Oh,
People were tutting. And I am curious about that. I'm curious to know, how are they all now? How are they doing with your decision?
I don't really care is my answer, because it's taken me a long time to get here, I have to say. And this has been years of work
Yeah.
on my own stuff. But I think one of my biggest things is the things people say to people who are grieving and or who have been through a trauma. And it's taken me a long time to try and to kind of get the higher perspective on it. And I know that they come from a place of just maybe ignorance and not knowing what effect their words are having on people. And they often are coming from a place of love and wanting to comfort or wanting to help, or feeling awkward and wanting to say something and not knowing the right thing to say. And so then they just say the completely wrong thing. Or it's based on their thoughts, beliefs, opinions that are not necessarily in alignment with yours. So it's taken me a long time to get that higher perspective. But even so, the things that people say can be hugely damaging and or hurtful and or restricting, like stop you from processing or grieving the way you need to because you think you are doing something wrong. And I remember the officiant who gave the little ceremony when we had our thing for Conor in the garden, our little memorial. He said to me, "You're doing all the right things." And I thought, am I? Like, what are all the right things? What are the wrong things then? Do you know?
Mm, mm,
Um, and I just found it interesting, and they've been, things people said, and I know there's a million stories, like you should be over it by now. Are you still talking about
yeah,
it? Like, it's like,
mm,
no, I'm never going to be over it. Do
mm,
it's going to be processed and integrated as a part of my story, and I'm going to have found a level of peace, hopefully at
mm,
some point, but I'm never going to be over it. Do you know?
no,
And so it's all these expectations, like, and it comes down from generations and, you know, society and all that kind of stuff. It's very complicated, but I was really grateful that I had done enough work at the time that Connor died. I'd worked through enough of the stuff from my fiancé that I had, and also through working with other people and speaking to
yeah,
other people who are going through grief, and just seeing how that's affected them and their journeys, the inability to be authentic and listen to their own needs. And that really gave me the freedom to just go, well, I don't care. They can tut as much as they want.
Mm.
I'm doing what's good for me. It's not their journey. They haven't lost a child. I have. And so, my husband has, we have as a family. So we're going to do what's right for us, But that takes courage as well, to kind of go
Yeah,
against your grain.
yeah. Convention and tradition, while they have their place, I understand, this structure, but it's so restricting, when this is how it's done and it's only done this way.
Yeah. Look, I think it serves some people. I think there's a huge amount of comfort in
Mm.
it. And when you are in that space, kind of not having to think of what to do because there is a convention or a norm or something to just lean
Yeah,
into and allow to happen. But it doesn't work for everybody, and you don't have to do it that way if it doesn't suit you. If it works for you, fabulous. Lean into it. But if it doesn't, and that's the problem, is that as soon as it doesn't work for you or you don't want to do it that way, then there's the tut-tutting, right?
yeah. I'm reminded of two examples. One was my dad was a bit of a maverick, a bit of a bohemian, and he was deeply spiritual, but he didn't like religions. He said there were clubs and you had to pay your dues and abide by the rules, and he wasn't doing any of that. Thank you very much. So he had a heart condition, and he knew that that was probably what would take him, and it is what took him, and he died in 1999.
I have to just pause you there and
He
say that's the same year
oh,
that my fiance died.
oh
Yeah.
gosh. Ah, wow. Yeah, he died on his birthday, the 13th of September.
Wow. I'm sorry for your
Yeah.
loss. But how's that for a beautiful full
Yeah,
cycle? I don't know.
75 years old. He'd be 100 this September now in 2024 if he was still alive. But we buried him according to his wishes, which was in his own orchard in
Lovely.
County Donegal, in the garden of his home. And that was his wishes. As a family, we created our own ceremony for him, and I read a poem, and my brother said a few words, and my sister read a little piece that she had written, a letter to him, and all of that. So it was really beautiful and very fitting of the man. And actually, the local priest came, and he didn't wear his collar. He just came as a member
Oh,
of the
that's so
congregation,
respectful.
if
I
you
love
want.
it.
On the other hand, and it's not that the other example wasn't lovely, but a friend of mine's husband died very suddenly, just had a massive heart attack one morning, and he was only 52. He would have been he was an artist, and he was a bit bohemian too, but his funeral was held in the Catholic tradition. There was a line in the mass where they said that he is now in the bosom of Christ, something along those lines. And even though it's only words, I was sitting there going, I'm not sure that's where he was. Knowing him, and it just didn't feel fitting. And I don't mean that in any way disrespectfully, but it's just an example, I suppose, of how sometimes these things fit and sometimes they don't.
I have found through my own experience and through working with people that when there's that incongruency with the rituals or whatever you want to call them, or the
Mm.
things that we do once a person has died, when there's incongruency there, it makes the grief so much harder. Like it's like you get stuck there and you can't move
Yeah.
past it because it's not aligned and it's not fitting and it's not working for you. And so it's
Yeah.
not helpful. It doesn't help. And the reason why those things are there is to help us move through our grieving process. It's kind of trying to find that closure or understanding that this phase is finished, that the
Mm.
cycle of is finished, and when it doesn't align, then it doesn't work. It doesn't serve its
Sure.
purpose.
Yeah. And all of these traditions and rituals are a container, aren't they, for the grieving people. And I really commend you, Michelle, though, for following your needs and what was right for you as a family, to do what was right for you around Conor James,
Thank you.
and that all those synchronicities have brought you here. Michelle, I often ask a person at this point in our conversation, what would your life be like if you hadn't taken a look at the pebble in your shoe? And I'm not sure that it's actually the right question, because it strikes me that you have really honored the pebbles in your shoe throughout your life. But can you even just surmise, if you hadn't have followed that knowing and that wanting to pay it forward and stuff, if you'd have ignored that, what would have it
I
looked
don't know.
like?
I don't think I would have processed and worked through my grief and trauma experiences as well as I have. Obviously, having the knowledge, like having the book smarts, so to speak, around it has helped me hugely, obviously, understand my own journey, but also being able to reach out and get the support. I don't know that I would have been so open to it. And I feel that I've had massive healing for myself through working with other people, through, I always learn something. You always learn something from the people that you work with. It's not only a one-way street. I would have missed out on all of that. I would have missed out on a huge amount of healing for myself. So I definitely don't think I would have integrated, processed these events as well as I feel I have. I wouldn't have been opened to the opportunities to do so. When you don't honor that pebble in your shoe and you don't work to remove it or whatever needs to happen to it, it's just going to stay there worrying you. And I think it would have just been a thing grating me my whole
Mm,
life, and I probably would be a very different person and maybe have a very different outlook. I don't know. It's hard to say. I think we can't control what happens to us, but we do get to choose how we move forward. And no matter what happens to anybody, they've always got a choice. And those choices can change, right? So, like, you can choose to go inward and sit with it for however long, and then you can also make another choice to then open up to healing. And so, I guess I've made the best choices for me. I think I'd still be sitting with a whole lot of hurt and pain and questions and anger and
yeah.
all that big wound that is not healed, and all that stuff spills into every area of your life, right?
Yeah, wow. You've been so generous with sharing your story, Michelle, and so authentic. I'm really grateful to you for all of that.
That's a pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity, because I really hope that parts of my story can maybe give comfort or hope or encouragement to others.
Yeah. What does now and the future look like for you?
What does now in the future look like for me? I don't know. The future looks like just continuing to work with people who are working through their trauma and grief experiences, and I just really want to reach out and help as many people as I can, just ease that load and ease that big hurt. And also then just really appreciating and being grateful for what I do have, and the experiences that I do have, and the children that I do have here on this earth. Yeah, I think that's kind of my life, just enjoying watching them grow up, and then, work sense kind of helping as many people as I can, just, realize that they can dig through the layers, and as much as it's hard and as much as it takes courage and as much as sometimes we don't want to go there, especially to the big hurts and the big feelings that we'd way rather suppress. Like, if there's
Yeah.
one thing I've learned, is that suppressing it always just means it comes back to bite you somewhere along the line in a big explosive way at the most inconvenient time. So it's just way better to just try and look at it, love it, and process it, and then release it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So how can people get in touch with you? Like, if there's a listener who maybe feels that you could help them, how could they get in touch?
I think probably the best way would be to just pop me an email, and that's Mich, Mich, at michfunke.com, or just visit my website, michfunke.com.
Lovely. And I'll put the details in the show notes
Thank
so
you.
people can make contact if they need to, or just find out more. So thank you so, so much for coming on the podcast and for sharing your story. And I wish you so much love and continued healing and growth. And the work you do is phenomenal, Mish. So well done.
Thank you. And thank you for holding space for me here today, and allowing me to share my story with your listeners. I think you're also doing amazing work, and I think it's a beautiful thing to hold that space for people's stories, you know, because that's what our lives are ultimately made up of, isn't it? Is our stories.
Yeah, that's lovely.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to The Pebble in My Shoe. It's hard to really fathom the depth of grief Michelle has gone through, and I'm in awe of her courage to honour the deep sense of purpose from her experience to serve others on a similar path. I hope this conversation has shone light on how it takes courage to grieve. There's not one way to navigate the process, and one of the things I'm taking from it is that healing grief is more a journey than a destination. I've put Michelle's contact details in the show notes. If you've enjoyed listening, please like, subscribe, and share it with others. It makes it easier for other people to find the podcast. And if you have a story to tell about a pebble in your shoe, please get in touch. I'd love to talk with you about it for the listeners. As well as hosting this podcast, I'm a personal growth coach, a mindfulness tutor, and I develop resources that support, nurture, and energize the user. My beliefs are aligned with living mindfully, standing in my truth, and owning my power. This isn't always an easy task and can feel like more of an aspiration than a reality at times. That said, when we do stand in our truth and own our power, even if our knees tremble, it is so life-affirming and rewarding. My own life challenges and experiences inform my philosophy and my work. I'm in my element, holding space for other people to explore themselves so they can stand in their power too. On my website, www.daisycoaching.ie, there are links to book discovery calls or coaching sessions with me, news and information about what's new in the Daisy coaching world, and a range of self-directed personal growth and mindfulness resources to support, nurture, and energize your authentic self. I look forward to sharing the next episode of The Pebble in My Shoe with you. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.